Hi, and welcome to the Our Disability Pride workshop. We will be discussing the Anti-Ableist Manifesto by Tiffany Yu, smashing stereotypes, forging change, and building a disability inclusive world. I had the pleasure and the honor of interviewing Tiffany Yu last August, so you can head over to the Common Courageous podcast on YouTube and watch that interview. In the Anti-Ableist Manifesto, you learn how to challenge your own ableism, how to be a better ally, and how to create a more inclusive world. I am not going to be talking about this book in its entirety. This is a three-part series workshop, but instead, I just pull out key points that speak to me, that I really want to share with others. But again, to get everything, I suggest you get the book yourself. But I hope you enjoy, I hope you learn a lot, and thank you for joining me today. So, I have been living with primary lymphedema since I was 9 years old. My family noticed that my legs were swelling. And of course, they were petrified because they couldn't figure out what was going on. So I went to the doctor, I had tests done, x rays, scans, and then they did this test where they inject you with a blue dye into your veins. I'm assuming it's your lymphatic vessels actually, but they then scan you after and they could see, okay, her lymphatic fluid isn't pumping correctly and she has a lymphatic disorder. And in my case, it was lymphedema. So from the age of 9, I've worn compression garments, I've had to wrap my legs, I use a compression pump. And in a lot of ways, it's an invisible disability because unless I'm wearing a skirt, shorts, you may not know. I also have 5 kids, my husband and I together, and 2 of those children are deaf. And when we learned that they had their hearing loss, that's when I said, I want to be a disability advocate, a disability pride advocate, and I want my kids to have a sense of self and confidence. And that's when I decided to create our disability pride. Not all disabilities are apparent. When people think of disability, they picture a wheelchair, but most disabilities are invisible. Chronic illness, ADHD, autism, hearing loss, mental health conditions, epilepsy, and many others that may not be obvious. We should never assume that we know someone's experience simply by looking at them. What is disability? Well, what you may read if you look it up in the dictionary is a physical, mental, cognitive, or developmental condition that impairs, interferes with, or limits a person's ability to engage in certain tasks or actions or participate in typical daily activities. In the book, The Anti-Ableist Manifesto, Tiffany Yu suggests a very different way to look at disability. She says, I don't like using the term impair to describe a person's body and or mind. The term impair means to diminish or to weaken or to worsen. And when we say that a disability impairs our life experiences, it suggests 2 things. First, that the disability has a negative connotation. Second, it suggests that our disability is the reason for or cause of any of life's negative experiences. This is inaccurate, she says. Disability itself is not the cause of our negative experience, as we will come to learn in the next few chapters. Instead, it is the way that our society is built to favor non disabled people and discriminate against disabled people that causes us to be harmed. And I think that that's a really great way to think of it and a way to describe disability. What she's saying, to summarize, is this disability itself is not the cause of the negative experience. But when you don't give accurate accommodations, accessibility, and when society as a whole has an inaccurate understanding of disability, it can make it so much harder than it needs to be. And that is more so the negative experience that this disabled person or someone living with a disability is experiencing. This brings me to my next point. What is ableism? I had never thought about ableism. I had never come to be familiar with the word until my oldest deaf child was born. My husband and I have 5 kids. 3 are hearing and 2 are hard of hearing. And my oldest hard of hearing son, when he was born, it was harder to accept the first child having the hearing loss because I was so dealing with my own internalized ableism around my own disability, around society's perception of what it means to be acceptable. And so I knew that when my daughter Isla was born, I said, you know what? I want my children to have a different experience. And I started researching. I started understanding and learning more about disability. And that's when I came across the term ableism. And ableism is a prejudice and a discrimination against disabled people. It appears in attitudes, systems, and environments that assume that disabled people are less capable or valuable. It can be obvious or subtle, but it always limits inclusion. And it's important to know ableism and start to understand it inside of yourself so that you can be just a better participant in society and a much better ally. What is anti-ableism? Because that's the goal we want to get to. It's an active strategies, attitudes, and practices that challenge and dismantle ableism, discrimination, and prejudice against people with disabilities. It promotes the belief that disabilities are natural human variations rather than deficiencies, ensuring disabled individuals are granted equal rights, respect, and accessibility in all aspects of life. Instead of seeing people as living with deficiencies, inadequate, unacceptable, instead we see disability as a normal part of diversity. Disability is not a bad word. Words matter. Avoid ableist language and use respectful alternatives. Inclusive language creates belonging. It helps everyone feel valued, respected. Mistakes are part of learning. In the interview with Tiffany Yu on the Common Courageous podcast, if you watch it, you'll see she gives examples of when to not stop and correct someone in a conversation, but instead say, hey, earlier we were talking, I noticed that you use this term. Here is the correct term. I recently had someone, I did another podcast, someone else's podcast, and in the description, she says, she refers to my kids as hearing impaired. And so I just messaged her and said, thank you so much for interviewing me. Thank you for having me on your podcast. But the correct term is deaf or hard of hearing. And hearing impaired is not the accurate term. It's actually an ableist term that we no longer use. Most people don't know that. Of course you don't. But it was an opportunity for her to learn and for her then to pass it on. People don't know, and their intentions aren't always, it could be sometimes, to harm. But the more people know, the better off they are. The goal is to challenge stigma, focus on accessibility, respect instead of stereotypes. And as we mentioned, disability is a part of diversity. It exists across every race, culture, age, religion, and community. Some disabilities are visible and others are not. And disability pride recognizes disability as a valuable part of our human diversity. Recognizing everyday ableism, harmful assumptions, microaggressions, inspiration stereotypes. Think of comments like, but you don't look disabled, and never assume that someone always needs your help. Ask first. Which one are you? The goal is to build inclusive communities. Like we said before, accessibility, universal design, inclusive communication, and listening to disabled voices. From awareness to allyship, ask before helping. Don't assume that someone in a wheelchair wants you to push them. Ask them. Respect accommodations. I have to, my son is in soccer and he has to wear an FM radio. His coach, has to wear an FM radio mic around his neck. One of the things that I'm grateful for is the coach is always warm, willing, and welcoming. Never have I had a problem with the coach wearing the FM radio around his neck and clipped to his shirt so that my son can hear clearly into his hearing aid what the coach needs from him and what the instructions are. That's him respecting the accommodations, and I'm grateful for that. Challenge stereotypes and amplify disabled voices. Follow disabled creators online. Let the disabled community speak for themselves. You don't need to speak for a disabled person. I don't need to speak for the deaf community. I speak as a parent who is raising the children who are deaf and hard of hearing. But we don't get to speak for the others who are living with their disabilities. Instead, we ask questions, we're curious, we support from behind, aside, rather than out front. I want you to take some time to reflect. What surprised you? What will you change? And please share this with a partner. As I said before, this is the first part in a 3-part series. I wanted to start off, I didn't want to have too many slides. I didn't want to overwhelm you. And I wanted it to be able to be ingested and enjoyed without being too long. Our Disability Pride's mission is to celebrate disability identity, empower families, and build inclusive communities through programs, workshops, story time, and advocacy. I want to leave you with this quote by Neil Marcus. I found this quote, I guess maybe 5 years ago, when I started to dive into disability pride and wanting to own this journey and encourage my kids to have a sense of self and pride and to see themselves as whole, capable individuals who are navigating life in their own unique way. Disability is not a brave struggle or courage in the face of adversity. Disability is an art. It is an ingenious way to live. Thank you for tuning in to the very first workshop of Our Disability Pride, and I hope that you'll come back for the last 2 parts and learn how to be anti-ableist and also how to be an ally, support, and a friend. Thank you so much.